You were trained to be nice, trained to keep everyone comfortable, to smooth over tensions, to be the person who never causes problems. Your parents praised you for being such a good child when you stayed quiet. Your teachers loved how you never gave them trouble. Society rewarded your compliance with approval, with acceptance, with that warm feeling of being liked. But Carl Jung would tell you something that might shatter everything you believe about being good. Your kindness is a prison, and you are both the prisoner and the jailer. Jung didn't see people-pleasing behavior as goodness. He saw it as the ultimate betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. Because every time you say yes when your soul screams no, every time you smile when you want to cry, every time you shrink yourself so others can feel bigger, you're not being good. You're disappearing. And here's the brutal truth no one wants to admit. The people you're trying so desperately to please can't actually see you. They see a convenient, pleasant shadow. They see someone who will always say yes, who will always be available, who will always put their needs last. But they don't see the real you, because you stopped showing up years ago. What if I told you that your goodness is killing your soul, that your kindness is keeping you trapped, that your need to be liked is exactly what's making you invisible? You think pleasing people makes you a better person, but it actually makes you invisible. You think saying yes earns you more respect, but it actually teaches others that your time has no value. You think avoiding conflict brings you peace, but it actually fills you with silent resentment. You don't gain more love by being easy to manipulate. You don't build genuine relationships by always being available. You don't find inner peace by being passive. You simply disappear, slowly, quietly, and nobody notices. You believe you're being helpful, cooperative, supportive, but the truth is, you're abandoning yourself. And every time you do this, you teach the world that your needs don't matter, that your time is flexible, that your boundaries are optional, that your silence is approval. With every forced yes, you become more of a puppet. With every boundary you don't set, you become more of a doormat. Every time you swallow your words to maintain harmony, you lose another piece of who you really are. And the worst part? You do this believing it's love. You confuse self-sacrifice with generosity. You interpret your own betrayal as virtue. You celebrate your invisibility as maturity. But one day, you wake up and ask yourself, why do I feel so tired? Why do I feel so resentful? Why do I feel so fake? Why doesn't anyone really see me? The answer is simple and painful. Because you spent so much time being who others wanted you to be, you completely forgot who you really are. You became a character in a play you don't even like, playing a role that's destroying your soul. Carl Jung didn't call this people-pleasing. He called it persona, the mask you wear to survive society's demands. And here's what Jung understood that modern psychology missed. This mask isn't false. It's functional. You put it on to navigate school, family, relationships, work. It helps you fit in. It helps you survive. The problem arises when you start identifying with the mask, when you forget where it ends and you begin, when you lose the one thing that makes life real, authenticity. And this is exactly what happens to people who live to please others. Somewhere in childhood, they learned that being honest meant being rejected, that expressing frustration meant being punished, that having needs meant being selfish, so they adapted, so they smiled when they wanted to cry, said yes when they wanted to scream, acted small so others could feel big. They learned that love isn't given, it's earned through performance. And so the mask became permanent. Jung called this the fracture of the soul. It's not just a behavioral problem, it's an existential crack. Because when you abandon your true self repeatedly, you don't just lose your voice, you lose your identity. You start asking yourself, who am I without this role? What if people leave me when I stop giving? Will anyone stay if I finally say what I feel? These aren't superficial fears. They're existential terrors, because your survival once depended on being liked, and now you've confused being liked with being safe. But the problem is that every time you choose safety over truth, you lose a little more of yourself. You become someone others depend on, but whom nobody really knows. And here's the secret most people never admit. The people pleaser receives love, but it always feels fake. Because deep down you know they're loving a version of you that doesn't even exist. They're loving the agreeable you, the reliable you, the flexible you. But what happens when you're tired? When you have boundaries? When you finally say, enough? Then the love disappears. And what's left is guilt, silence, self-doubt. But Jung would say, good, because this is the beginning of your real life. Every time you avoid saying no, you're saying yes to self-destruction. The high cost of being liked isn't just emotional, it's physical, mental, spiritual. Your body is keeping score of every betrayal you commit against yourself. You wake up tired, even after 8 hours of sleep. You feel burned out after every social interaction. You replay every conversation, analyzing every word, wondering if you said something wrong, if you disappointed someone. You respond to messages immediately, even when you don't want to. You say yes to invitations that drain your energy. You carry everyone's emotional weight except your own. This isn't sensitivity. This is emotional prison, and it gets worse. Because the more you please people, the more you teach them to expect your compliance. You train them to walk over you, and they will. Not always because they're cruel, but because you've said yes so many times they've stopped believing you had a no. You become the friend everyone seeks when they need something, but nobody invites when they want to have fun. You become the colleague who always gets the extra work, but never gets the recognition. You become the partner who always gives in, but whose needs are never a priority. And the most devastating part, you start believing this is love. That being used is being useful. That being ignored is being humble. That being stepped on is being virtuous. Your resentment grows like a silent tumor. You smile on the outside while grinding your teeth on the inside. You help while secretly hating having to help. You say, it's fine, when nothing is fine. Jung understood that repression creates distortion. And when you repress your anger, your instincts, your voice, you don't become nicer. You become passive-aggressive, bitter, disconnected. Because you know deep down that you're not being honest. You're performing. You're pretending. You're managing others' emotions instead of expressing your truth. And eventually your body will show the signs. Constant anxiety, panic attacks, unexplained depression, mysterious illnesses that doctors can't diagnose. Every time you avoid saying no, you're saying yes to self-destruction. The high cost of being liked isn't just emotional, it's physical, mental, spiritual. Your body is keeping score of every betrayal you commit against yourself. You wake up tired, even after 8 hours of sleep. You feel burned out after every social interaction. You replay every conversation, analyzing every word, wondering if you said something wrong, if you disappointed someone. You respond to messages immediately, even when you don't want to. You say yes to invitations that drain your energy. You carry everyone's emotional weight, except your own. This isn't sensitivity. This is emotional prison, and it gets worse. Because the more you please people, the more you teach them to expect your compliance. You train them to walk over you, and they will. Not always because they're cruel, but because you've said yes so many times they've stopped believing you had a no. You become the friend everyone seeks when they need something, but nobody invites when they want to have fun. You become the colleague who always gets the extra work, but never gets the recognition. You become the partner who always gives in, but whose needs are never a priority. And the most devastating part? You start believing this is love. That being used is being useful. That being ignored is being humble. That being stepped on is being virtuous. Your resentment grows like a silent tumor. You smile on the outside while grinding your teeth on the inside. You help while secretly hating having to help. You say, it's fine, when nothing is fine. Jung understood that repression creates distortion. And when you repress your anger, your instincts, your voice, you don't become nicer. You become passive-aggressive, bitter, disconnected. Because you know deep down that you're not being honest. You're performing. You're pretending. You're managing others' emotions instead of expressing your truth. And eventually, your body will show the signs: constant anxiety, panic attacks, unexplained depression, mysterious illnesses that doctors can't diagnose. But here's the paradox that will change everything. You cannot be loved if you are not known. The people you're trying so desperately to please don't know the real you. They only know the edited version you've been showing. And you're afraid to change now because if you suddenly start setting boundaries, they'll say you've changed. They'll say you're being selfish. They'll say you're being cold. But that's not the truth. The truth is they simply got used to your silence, your softness, your submission. And when you finally start being honest, it feels like aggression. Not because you're hurting them, but because your honesty is finally protecting you. And this is where Jung would say, this is the moment where individuation begins. Individuation isn't self-help. It's not personal development. It's self-possession. It's the process of becoming a complete and integrated human being with a backbone, a shadow, a voice, and a no that means something. And until you get there, you'll always feel slightly empty. Like something is wrong. Like your life doesn't completely belong to you. This isn't depression. It's your true self trying to wake you up. Trying to scream through your fake smiles. Trying to cut through your pleasant emails. Trying to break out of the script you've been acting out for years. And the only way out is to stop pleasing. What happens when you finally stop? People are going to be uncomfortable. Some will get angry. Some will leave. Some will try to guilt you back into docility. Let them. This isn't cruelty. This is clarity. Jung called this process individuation. And it's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's saying, yes, I care about others, but I also care about myself. Yes, I want peace, but not at the cost of my truth. Yes, I love you, but I won't abandon myself to keep you. This isn't rebellion. This is maturity. Individuation is the process of reuniting with your shadow. Those parts of you that you exiled to be accepted. Your legitimate anger, your right to say no, your healthy pride, your inconvenient truth. All the parts of you that were labeled as bad or selfish when you were a child. Imagine a musician who spent their whole life playing only the notes others wanted to hear. They became technically proficient, but lost their own music in the process. Individuation is like finding your original melody again, not to be discordant, but to be authentic. Jung believed that the self doesn't emerge through approval. It emerges through conflict, through confronting people who got used to your silence, through disappointing those who only loved your compliance, through risking rejection to become real. And here's the plot twist. When you stop pleasing people, you don't lose relationships. You lose unbalanced relationships. You lose people who benefited from your self-abandonment and make space for people who see you, love you, and can stand beside you without needing to control you. Think of it this way. You've been living like an actor on a stage, playing the role of good person for so long that you forgot who you are when the curtains close. Individuation is the moment you finally leave the stage and discover that your real life is far more interesting than any character you've played. But this requires courage. The courage to pause before saying yes. The courage to let people feel disappointed. The courage to step away from approval and walk toward authenticity. When you become individuated, you no longer need constant validation from others because you have something more valuable. Self-respect. You no longer need to manage everyone's feelings because you've learned that each person is responsible for their own emotions. You become someone who is respected, not just tolerated, someone who is chosen, not just used, someone who is loved for your truth, not your performance. And this changes everything, because when you finally know yourself, you attract people who actually want to know you too. But you're thinking, what if I hurt people? What if they abandon me? What if I become too selfish? These fears are natural. They're part of the process. But Jung would tell you something that might sound shocking. Your fear of disappointing others is actually a form of arrogance. Think about it. When you assume people can't handle your honesty, You're assuming they're too fragile for the truth. When you avoid conflicts to protect others, you're deciding for them what they can or cannot handle. People are more resilient than you imagine, and those who truly care about you prefer your imperfect honesty to your perfect performance. But what if I lose friends? Let me ask you, are they really your friends if they only like you when you're being convenient? If they only value you when you're saying yes? These aren't friendships, they're arrangements of convenience. What if I become cruel? There's a huge difference between being cruel and having boundaries. Cruelty is inflicting unnecessary pain. Having boundaries is protecting your energy and integrity. You can be kind without being a doormat. You can be loving without being a martyr. What you're calling fear of being selfish is actually decades of conditioning telling you that your needs don't matter. But having needs isn't selfishness, it's humanity. Jung understood that integrating the shadow is what makes someone whole, and your ability to be misunderstood without falling apart is part of that shadow work. You're not here to manage how everyone feels about you. You're here to be rooted in who you are, especially when people don't understand. The discomfort you feel when you set boundaries isn't proof that you're wrong. It's proof that you're finally moving. It's proof that you're choosing growth over comfort, authenticity over approval. Most modern advice tells you to speak up more, set boundaries, take time for yourself. It sounds nice, but Jung went deeper. He believed that people-pleasing isn't just a behavioral problem, it's a fracture of the soul. Because when you abandon your true self repeatedly, you don't just lose your voice, you lose your identity. You start asking yourself, who am I without this role? What if people leave when I stop giving? Will anyone stay if I finally say what I feel? These aren't superficial fears. They're existential terrors because your survival used to depend on being liked, and now you've confused being liked with being safe. Jung called this identification with the persona. The persona is necessary. You need social masks to function in the world. But when you forget it's a mask, when it becomes your permanent identity, you lose touch with who you really are. Think about how this started. You were a child who naturally expressed your emotions, your desires, your opinions. But maybe you learned that crying bothered adults, that disagreeing caused tension, that having your own needs was being difficult. So you adapted. You developed super-sensitive antennas to pick up others' moods. You learned to read between the lines, to anticipate what people wanted to hear, to mold yourself to fit others' expectations. This wasn't your fault. It was a brilliant survival strategy for a child. The problem is, you never stopped using this strategy. You kept molding yourself, adapting, shrinking, even when you no longer needed to. Jung understood that the path back to yourself isn't easy, because you have to unlearn decades of conditioning. You have to question every automatic yes. You have to face the discomfort of disappointing people. You have to rediscover who you are when you're not trying to be who others want you to be. But here's the crucial difference. Jung wasn't interested in making you more assertive. He was interested in making you more whole. It's not about learning to say no. It's about reconnecting with the self that always knew when to say no. That self never completely disappeared. It was just buried under layers of social conditioning. And every time you feel that discomfort, when you're about to say yes, when you want to say no, it's that true self trying to communicate with you. So how do you become that person? How do you stop pleasing without becoming cruel? Here are the 5 steps Jung would say are essential. 1. Recognize the guilt loop for what it is. When you finally stop people-pleasing, you're going to feel guilty. You'll feel it in your stomach, in your throat, in your silence. It will feel like you're being mean, like you're disappointing people, like you're doing something wrong. But Jung would tell you, this isn't guilt, it's withdrawal. You're detoxing from a lifetime of approval addiction. You're experiencing the emotional discomfort of reclaiming your power after years of giving it away. Of course it's going to feel heavy. Let the guilt come. Don't fight it. Don't overanalyze it. Just feel it and do the right thing anyway. This is how power returns, in the space where guilt no longer dictates your actions. 2. Redefine your worth. People pleasers get their worth from one thing: how useful they are to others. If you're helpful, you feel valuable. If you're needed, you feel secure. If you're liked, you feel important. But Jung would tell you, that's not worth. That's conditional performance. And the danger: the moment you stop being useful, you feel disposable. The work is simple, but not easy. You must redefine what makes you valuable. Not your usefulness, not your sacrifice, not your compliance, but your truth, your presence, your boundaries, your ability to be completely yourself, even when it disappoints people. That's where your real worth lives. Not in what you do for others, but in what you no longer do against yourself. 3. Learn to disappoint without apologizing. Let this be your next milestone. You can disappoint people and still be good, still be kind, still be valuable. You can say no without over-explaining, without apologizing, without softening it, so they feel better. Because every time you soften your boundary to protect someone else's feelings, you reinforce the lie that your needs are dangerous. They're not. They're sacred. 4. Start small, stay unmovable. You don't need to announce your new identity. You don't need to prove how confident you are. You don't need to argue with everyone who doubts you. Just start small. Don't respond right away. Don't explain every no. Don't apologize for things that aren't wrong. Don't offer more than you want to give. Let it be quiet. Let it be consistent. And soon something magical happens. People start recalibrating their expectations of you. They stop pushing, stop assuming, stop draining, because you've trained them through your silence, your firmness, and your peace that you're no longer here to please. You're here to be whole. 5. Embody the new pattern. Once you stop pleasing, you're going to start attracting differently. People who loved your compliance will drift away. Let them. That's proof you were being used, not loved. And in their place will come people who respect your silence, match your honesty, support your growth, love you for your truth, not your performance. You're going to stop people pleasing after this. Not because you became cold, but because you became conscious. Carl Jung didn't want you to become cruel. He wanted you to wake up. Stop performing. Stop diminishing yourself. Stop bleeding your soul for people who wouldn't give you a band-aid. He wanted you to become someone who is clear in their no, honest in their presence, rooted in their discomfort, whole even when it makes others uncomfortable. Because those who have truly healed aren't those who are always liked. They're those who are free. Free to love without losing themselves. Free to help without sacrificing themselves. Free to care without abandoning themselves. Free to say yes when they want to and no when they need to, without guilt running through their veins. Jung knew that individuation isn't a gentle process. It's uncomfortable. It's lonely sometimes. Some people will judge you. Some will abandon you. Some will try to guilt you back into being the puppet you used to be. Let them. Because on the other side of this transformation is the person you always were, but never had permission to be. The person who doesn't need approval to breathe, who doesn't need validation to exist, who doesn't need to please to be loved. That person has been waiting for you your whole life, waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to stop hiding, waiting for you to finally come home, to the only place you ever belonged, within yourself. Welcome back.